Hello everyone and welcome back into the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast for our final segment of the day here, my Don't Be Surprised If segment. Now, all of these predictions are up for debate, of course. But these are predictions that I feel can be justified. Now, whether or not they hit is up to God's hands or up to fate. But I still have fun doing this, concluding my Monday show with that. So let me know what you think about it in the comments, because it's always a lot of fun trying to raise some eyebrows here. Without further ado, let's jump right into our final segment of the day show, starting off continuously singing the praises of a guy who I kind of put down last week, Mr. Derek Carr being a shock top 10 candidate at the position next week against the Browns. And to be honest with you, I believe this one has become less and less shocking. Now, obviously, the Saints right now are a huge question mark of a team. They have a lot of situations to figure out. Their cap positions, what head coach is going to be hired for them this coming season, or if Darren Rizzi will remain the head coach for the rest of the season. So a lot going on in that organization. A lot of external issues, potentially turmoil in this season and in the Saints locker room. But Derek Carr is someone who this season, and no matter how long he continues to play, like I said, has a special talent of making explosive plays. And this weekend proved, yes, it was against the Falcons defense that, again, I'll continue to say is not necessarily the best in the National Football League. Potentially a bottom 10 unit in the secondary. But he proved that if he's willing to take those deep shots, he can potentially bring back the explosive element of the Saints offense, no matter who rotates in and out of this offense with all the injuries they have. And so against the Browns secondary, that's kind of the Falcons secondary, except a little bit better. I feel like Carr can have a very similar game if he continues to be willing to take those deep shots, have the explosive play be an exciting element of the Saints offense again. Because let me be clear, in certain situations as this, when you have an interim guy and you feel like you're going to be rebuilding or rebooting this coming off season, Derek Carr is going to be a player who comes up a lot in these discussions, and potentially in a lot of discussions for teams who could be looking at a bridge option. Now, Derek Carr certainly has limitations, as we've seen this season. He needs to be in certain situations, protection is right, not the most mobile of quarterbacks, but if he shows us in these next couple of weeks that he's capable of continuing to rely on that one of his best traits, that deep ball, then he can be someone who can be viewed very highly this offseason. Potentially as a trade target if they want to unload more cap space to Saints, or potentially as someone who, let's say in the draft, if they don't necessarily rely on a guy like Rattler in the future or Hayner, what have you, they go out and draft and say the second or third rounds and develop him behind Derek Carr for another season. So this is a very interesting situation. But for as long as Derek Carr wants to continue to push the ball in the field, he's a very intriguing player to monitor the rest of the season from a real life and fantasy perspective. So that's why this prediction had to be my top one, because he's someone who can go from zero to hero very quickly. Then my second prediction, my second take of the week, another guy we talked about in the show, but let's talk about a teammate as well in this one, because while I do believe that Sam Darnold will shine, Justin Jefferson might not this week. And I know it's a bold claim because this is Titans defense that has its holes, kind of underrated though. So you can't put it past them to stymie them much like the Colts and Jaguars did. But the reason why I feel like Justin Jefferson might lose a little bit of his fantasy luster in the coming weeks is, like I said, the talent surrounding him, the skill position talent the Vikings have. Now, I think a lot of people are a little bit skeptical about the depth of position groups in Minnesota, but I still like a lot of these players. I like Jordan Addison developing into a very solid player with a lot of speed and rhythm into his game. TJ Hawkinson, like I said, coming back, gives you a middle-of-the-field option who can exploit soft coverages. And I like Jalen Nailor as a kind of gadget guy in this Viking system. So it's no slight to Justin Jefferson to say he'll have one bad game. It's just that I feel like in this game, we're going to become more and more aware of the options that Sam Darnold has at disposal and how he can utilize them. And so this is going to be one of those games where we finally see a fully healthy Vikings offense in its rhythm. And this could potentially come back to bite me because the Titans are a very tough team to play no matter how inept they've looked at certain points of the season. But I still think this is an opportunity for Sam Darnold to get back into rhythm because now he knows what TJ Hawkinson means to him. He now knows what this fully healthy offense looks like and how he can game plan and scheme for upcoming games. So look for him to be prepared in this one, unlike what he was against the Colts and Jags. But it might be to the detriment of Justin Jefferson owners. My third prediction that I want to talk about of the week, another guy who we talked about, all these guys coming back to rear their heads in the final segment of today's show. Bo Nix, QB of week in intra-conference shootout against the Falcons. Now, this is one of the games that I'm penciling as a highly interesting fantasy matchup. I'm going to be talking about this game a little bit later in the week, so I might want to save a little bit of details about why I'm so excited about it for that segment. But it still is going to be a very interesting game because on both sides of the field have the Falcons who come in with this interesting crop of talent. But it's all a question about how Kirk Cousins utilizes it. And the Broncos side of things, Bo Nix's ascension as someone who can be relied upon, it can start to be relied upon at the very least in deeper leagues, potentially dynasty leagues as well. So this prediction, while it certainly feels a little bit wonky, and this game certainly feels a little bit wonky at that in terms of these two teams and how they profile, I think Bo Nix is at the point where he feels that this offense can be operated at a high level. Now, there aren't that many weapons that I'll say are highly vaunted or fearsome in that Broncos offense. Potentially, Courtland Sutton can be that guy in the near future for them. But Bo Nix just really has been the reason why this Broncos offense is more than capable of springing shocks on people. And against the Falcons, like I said, a secondary who I'm not very high on at all for the rest of the way. Look for Bo Nix to take advantage of that and truly be someone who's showing maturity week in, week out. And in this rookie class that hasn't had much success at the QB position outside of Jaden Daniels, look for Bo Nix to potentially be in the reckoning as someone who, as a rookie quarterback, can take leaps and bounds next year. Because that's what everyone's going to be looking at. Because this year, all the quarterbacks from last year's draft have kind of regressed a little bit. But this class, this very special class, had the opportunity to develop and grow even more. And so look for Bo Nix to be the biggest beneficiary of that in this Sean Payton system. Should you know he continue to gain confidence and potentially pick up wins against teams that you might have expected the Broncos to contend with. So that's why I feel this take, even though it's still perhaps the biggest long shot out of all of them I'm giving to you guys, it's becoming more and more of a possibility. So look for Bo Nix to continue to grow and mature. Most importantly for you fantasy football managers, be someone who could potentially be looked at in years to come in different leagues for you. And the last thing I want to talk about, I kind of don't want to talk about it because it is my team and it's not necessarily the most positive of reviews of them, but it still is, as Splashbro says, Williams not lighting it up. I believe he's referring to Javonte Williams. And I don't necessarily think that's the problem for the Broncos because I feel like, yes, a lot of what the Broncos are doing is heavily Bo Nix involved. He has to know a lot of different play actions, plays. He has to, take a lot of shots on the field. And it's asking a lot of him in that Sean Payton system. But as Splasher says, May looks like he got a clue. Yeah, but he's still in a situation where I don't necessarily feel like until, pieces are brought in around him that he can truly succeed and make the Patriots a true contender again. Whereas Bo Nix is kind of making the Broncos a contender himself because of what he's learning through the Sean Payton system. But I do think you bring up a good point in that Williams isn't lighting it up, but I don't necessarily think he's the problem here. And Splashbus also mentions Caleb Williams, who I would rather not talk about because he has been so topsy-turvy that I can't really gauge whether or not he's truly maturing or not, because week in, week out, you can play great one time and then look abysmal the next. I think he did against the Patriots, ironically, this weekend. But getting back into my final take of the day here on the show, the Seattle receivers excel from a fantasy perspective, but fall short in their second matchup against the San Francisco 49ers this year. And, I wish I could say it could be a winning effort because this receiving core, when fully healthy, is one of the most vaunted in the league. DK is coming back from that MCL sprain for this game, I believe. And there's got a lot of excitement surrounding the growth of a guy like JSN. Tyler Lockett's still producing this late in his career. But ultimately, the problem does not just stem with this offense. It stems from an organizational kind of systemic problem here. I don't necessarily think this is the most organized of Seattle Seahawks teams by a long shot. You'll see. But it does have the potential to stick in enough football games. The Seattle offense can score on anybody. It's just that they seemingly shoot themselves in the foot too many times to say that they can win games like this against the San Francisco 49ers. Because remember last game, a lot of the points they scored in the second half were catch-up points. They had that lucky kickoff return touchdown. And they had a lot of garbage time points. But until this offense, especially along that line, proves that they can be efficient, make plays ahead of schedule, keep ahead of schedule most importantly, and prove that their shootout style of play is effective enough to win football games, then I have hope for them. But that being said, this receiver core is highly, highly fearsome. And from a fantasy perspective, I'm looking at this one to carry the week for you. But unfortunately, from a real-life perspective, as a Seattle Seahawks fan, this shootout style only works if you play mistake-free for an entire game, and they proved they can't. They come up short in this one. Let me know what you think in the comments about this segment. Well, just about do it for this show. This has been the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast, brought to you as always with the GSMC Sports Network. I've been Christopher Shepard. Thank you all for tuning in. Remember, as always, like, follow, and subscribe to the show on the network if you want more content such as this. Consider making yourselves available to the Super Chat, Super Thanks, and Super Stickers features here on YouTube to contribute and interact with the show. But other than that, I'll be back here at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time tomorrow for another show. I am